Thank you very much to the Love Hurts crew, to both Unicorns Love member and Quickshot as well. Welcome to the post-game lobby, where Deficio is joined now by Hussein Mousvi and Coach Fabian Sheepy Milan. So we got two coaches. We got Deficios.
Yeah. Almost the same.
It's almost the same. You're
almost.
Like a coach.
Yeah. Whatever you say. Whatever you say.
All right. Well, we're going to focus up. Sheepy, I want to go to you first. Coming out 2-0 in the end, how did you feel about that series?
I think we played pretty well. I think we didn't take too many risks. We played the game relatively normal. We pushed out lanes. I think we didn't go for so many flashy plays as people might have expected, but I think we just cleanly won the games.
Disappointed in the lack of flashy plays. Only Hylissang brought
You're so
up.
inconsistent. When they win and it's flashy plays.
Sheepy, it's never good enough. No, it was pretty good.
All right. Well, let's take a chance now to look back on the week. Of course, the series to start us all off was Misfits versus the Unicorns of Love. And I want to take a look back on that now. Misfits coming out on top in the end. Sheepy, we haven't heard as much from you about this series. I kind of wanted to get your thoughts overall.
I think in this series, our early game was not that great, to say it like this. We're not so prepared for the early game dives on the top side, and they were able to snowball relatively good in those games. And then afterwards it was harder to play the map, but I still think that we played better, stronger mid and late game. And I think that we could have won the series as well on another day. But yeah, props to Misfits in the end, winning out the game.
I agree with that. I think especially game 3, it was very close, and it really did come down to like the closest dragon fight, and you know, even at the end of the fight, it was a 50-50 Baron. So I think the series overall was close. I think both teams are probably even right now. Maybe we're better in the early game, they're better in mid game, but going into playoffs, I think both teams will probably fix their issues.
I think very fair to say. Let's take a chance now to look at another series we saw in the week. G2 versus Vitality coming in. Now, interesting to see G2 come back into this one.
Almost as close as Unicorns and Misfits. Not quite, not quite.
So I kind of wanted to get your guys' impressions of G2 as a team as we look at this one. Vitality maybe on the up and up a little bit, but not really vying for playoffs at this point. How did you guys feel about G2 watching this series, and do you feel like they're getting stronger, weaker? What's your impression overall?
I think it's a little difficult to say if they're stronger or weaker, because they looked okay at IEM. They made it to the finals to beat both Korean teams, but still you see those issues in G2 that you saw during the regular season as well. And Vitality is one of those teams that can't really punish that, so I think we'll have to see G2 against a better team to see if they're actually better from IEM, but they look good so far.
Yeah, they did their job. You know, that's kind of the thing right now. You know, when you have top 4 versus bottom 4, like same you guys today against Origin, you guys against Rocket. It's like you get to 2-0. You play like pretty well for most of it, and then you just did your job. You know, you kind of move on and you start focusing on the next series. I think it's the same for G2 here. So yeah, it's really hard to judge, you know, when the top teams are playing the bottom teams, if the top teams are like playing super well at the moment, or if it's just a really weak opponent.
But I'm actually happy to see that this is actually the outcome from it, because I think that there were times where, especially for us, we weren't sure going into the game if we're actually like stronger, because a lot relied onto how strong we felt in the meta and how the champions were and how our early game shaped up. And it could have like swung either way. And I think right now it's like maybe a bit clearer. Like you actually can see that they're making most of the times better decisions than the lower tier teams. And I think this is kind of nice to see as a trend, because now you can actually, for you, your job is a bit easier. You can go with a prediction and then and say, you know, it should actually be like this.
It's kind of opposite of what we used to have in Europe, where top teams would lose to bottom teams all the time. We never really knew, you know, who was consistent.
But it made it
or not.
so exciting.
But it made it very exciting, and now we always just looking forward to these big games between the top teams, because they are just performing much better than the rest.
All right, well, let's take a chance now to look at the standings and how they unfolded at the end of week 6. Groups A and B, two that we're going to have to look at here. G2 Esports, once again, on the top, undefeated. Misfits, close second, but of course, different group. Guys, is there anything that really stood out to you here this week, or is it as expected, utterly and completely?
I think expected. Honestly, there wasn't really any upsets right now. I think I'm still looking at like next week with Origin Rocket, Origin Giants, like then these fights down the bottom to see who can actually step out of this relegation zone.
Well, it's good that you mentioned it. Let's take a chance then to look at next week's schedule. We can talk a little bit more about those games. Maybe something that we're not going to see quite as expected. Now, coming up, Unicorns of Love, you guys are going to play Fnatic. Thoughts on that series, Sheepy? How do you feel about coming up against Fnatic so far?
Well, I think they got a lot of flack for their draft, And I feel drafting right now in Europe especially is like really, really important to come in with a good idea. I mean, especially when the first time we played against G2 and they really targeted like strategies from us, it like really shut us down in a way. And I think that against Fnatic, this will be a really big point. And just play-wise, I think that we have a really strong or solid mid-game right now. So I would expect us to come out stronger, but you never know. So yeah, I think for Fnatic, also with their changes, maybe not as strong as before. Or like, at least as they should be at this point in the split.
I think a bit of a common sentiment at this point. See how Fnatic adapts. Maybe they'll bring something new to the table. But of course, you're saying you guys now going up against H2K, another team in the top four, the upper echelon, top versus top battle. What do you think is going to be the big determining factor in that series?
I think the interesting about us and H2K is that we're very similar teams. We both have really good early games. We still have work to do in mid game. And then both teams focus very much on pushing waves, looking for vision, and maybe playing a little slower than other teams might, but really pushing for the best back row play. And it's honestly going to come down to whichever team does it best on that day. And I'm so excited for that match.
I just want Origin Rocket, man. Someone has to win down at the bottom.
All right, Fischio. I'll take that as positive attitude, I think.
Yeah, super positive. I'm actually really looking forward to that series.
All right. Do you get to cast it?
I do get to cast it with Quickshot. So
self-advertisement.
Just only
there you go, guys. Tune in on Thursday for that cast and the game.
Well, if you're joining us in the client, be sure to hit up youtube.com/LOLesports for the extended version of the post-game lobby. We're talking about a lot of different things tonight, something you won't want to miss. All right. We've done our official pause. We can now talk about whatever we want to. But first, we asked Twitter. We asked them to participate. We wanted to hear about favorite champions, favorite combos coming out. And I think pretty much all of Twitter was united. We're going to pull one tweet from West in particular who said, the Mega Hextech Inferno Ultimatum Bomb from the Splyce bot lane. Okay, so.
Camille Ziggs.
Camille Ziggs, for context here, gentlemen. Now I want your opinions on Camille Ziggs as a combo. We heard some like kind of jokey commentary coming in, some kind of serious. Is this viable and competitive?
I think it is viable.
Yeah.
If it's really strong, it's a different question. It's definitely viable.
I think it has a place, and the strength is more so probably in draft than like within the 2v2 itself. And more so, it opens up so many different possibilities for mid and top lane or for jungle. So I actually think that it's a very exciting duo down there.
Yeah, just imagine you can flex those into mid lane and into top lane, and maybe other roles as well.
Yeah.
Camille
Jungle,
into mid lane too.
AD carry. Where can't Camille go?
Yeah, it can go everywhere. But I think before the nerfs, this was actually like more legitimate, and you had like more burst potential and longer stun duration with Camille support. Now it's kind of fizzled out, and I think it's like okay, but not something that's insane.
Why did it take Europe like 4 to 5 weeks to start using Ziggs bot lane when from week 1 in LCK it was actually used already? Was it just because of Camille? Because I'm pretty sure we saw it in other situations as well, like after a few weeks. It just took quite a while.
I think that Ziggs overall bottom lane is strong because you can push the wave and you can contest if against certain ADCs you are like really, really strong, especially short range because they need to walk up. So I think it has its place. Also, from the research we did, that for example, Flash Wolves banned out every ADC and then just picked Ziggs, and then they had like a really strong bot lane. I mean, this is also an idea. But I think just overall in Europe, we have like different strengths and different strategies we go for. So the Ziggs bot lane is not really like the kicker in all the pick and ban phases.
I think in our case, like early on, of course we played against Ziggs and scrims and stuff, but teams have improved a lot in Europe since the LCS started to now. And I think that means that you can see the strength of Ziggs more, especially in practice, where before, because teams weren't making the best decisions, maybe the strength of Ziggs wasn't showing up so much here, where LCK is obviously a much stronger region there.
Oh, and I also think that Ziggs fitting in a team comp is way harder than, for example, like a Varus or an Ashe or a Jhin, because usually you get like this kind of engage a bit from bot lane. And with Ziggs, it's kind of the follow-up. Like you want to, I don't know, Camille goes in, ultimates like a target, and you just Ziggs ultimate on top of it. So yeah, I think that for us, it's more important to have like those other picks like Ashe and Jhin.
Yeah.
Good to see kind of how that will develop. Excited to hear that now the teams may know how to execute it more. I personally am a fan of the Ziggs AD carry, even if many of the other analysts think that it's a little limited. I think it would be the polite way to rephrase Krepo on that one. He hates it. I know he hates it. There's one thing that I really want to talk about, though. So I feel like so often recently when we judge a team and how well a top team is playing, in Europe and internationally as well, we always talk about the perfect game. You know, the ideal macro game, the killless, the bloodless game. And I want to kind of get your guys' opinion on the perfect game as a concept. Is this something that we should all be working towards? What is the place of the perfect game when we look for top teams to improve? Is this the shining gold standard, or should you look to do something different?
It's always tough because I don't think there's ever been a perfect game. But like anyone, we're not talking about the whole we don't give them any kills and towers and then we win the game, but more like every decision was just like the correct one. Because I feel like very often in League of Legends, decisions come down to like percentages. Basically, it's like if we dive top here, that's like an 80% play for us. So there's a high chance we can execute it. But there's another play which is a 70% play. So it's hard to say like, is there always this is the correct one, this is the wrong one? Or is there often just multiple options and it's just like a little bit different in terms of numbers, which one you pick, and certain teams might value one and the other team might value another one. So I think in that case it's hard to kind of all agree on what is the perfect game and if it is a perfect game, but I don't think it's ever happened that like a team just like did everything perfectly, even though I guess it's good to have it as a goal.
Yeah. I think what it comes down to is if you're coaching a team, obviously it's different. You're looking for the perfect game in the sense that you're examining every single decision that's made and seeing if it's the best decision that could be made, what are the chances of it working out, if there's something else we can do. So that's different. But when you're viewing a game, when you're studying the game, then there's different types of mistakes. There's mistakes where someone's just overextended and caught out. There's mistakes where someone forces an overextension or the vision just demands you to make a mistake. And those are the kind of mistakes that you can appreciate from the side of a team. I think Europe does a pretty good job of that right now, actually, with Vision. They've stepped up quite a bit.
Curious. I think for a perfect game, that's if you have two different teams executing something totally different, like 1-3-1 compared to 1-4, or any kind of combo play, or any kind of, I don't know, poke compositions. There's like different kind of 1-3-1 with double TP as well, which we like to play before in the split. I think if you have this clash of styles, I think that it's very, very hard to judge what is like the perfect game. Obviously, you should pursue to have the best decisions in every position, but it's like very hard to determine what is actually perfect. So you just kind of like curve out close to it and just say like, this is a better decision than the one before. Mm-hmm. Then you apply it, and next time you know if it's actually better. And especially in the development right now, it's like in every game, like Counter-Strike, chess, like even this kind of stuff is that I think our knowledge right now from League of Legends is already way more improved than, if you look back even like 2 months or 3. Mm-hmm. So it's actually really interesting to see that right now, whatever we perceive as like perfect game, or like even if we struggle towards it, might actually be extremely far away from the most positive thing that can happen. So I think it's something that we will not ever achieve, but we should definitely pursue it.
I just like to also look at like the plays being made and then kind of say in terms of risk and reward. So like there's a low risk, medium risk, high risk, and then of course low, medium, and high reward. And I feel like if you follow all the steps, oftentimes like if you always set up the vision first, if you then know the cooldowns on things like teleport and flash, if you understand the power spikes of your champions, you keep ticking some boxes that makes your play, whatever play it is you're about to do, like lower and lower risk. But at the same time, the reward might stay really, really high because you can now see everyone, so you go for that tower dive. It gives you 2 kills and a tower, and as long as you execute a fairly simple dive, you get, the big reward. And ideally, a team always looks for the low, maybe medium risk and high reward plays, but there is no game where you only have those kind of situations, and the enemy team is obviously trying to do exactly the same. So it gets really, really difficult, but I like to seeing a lot of teams with these low-risk plays that gives like a very clear reward. And you can see how they were setting up to make it a lower risk. Because diving without vision is very high risk. Place the deep wards first, boom, it might become a low risk play all of a sudden. And I like seeing those kind of things, and that's kind of how I can look at a great or perfect game in a sense, even though technically it never is just perfect everything.
I feel like for us, it's really easy to identify low/high risk plays when there's single picks around vision. I think the issue for me as a viewer that I always struggle with is team fighting. Like, how do you tell when a team is taking a good team fight versus a bad team fight when it's like a full-on 5v5, there's no clear like item advantage? Because so often when I see games like that, I think people are quick to label it like Clown Fiesta. Why are they fighting? What are they doing? Like, how can you call like a clean, or how can you tell like a clean play when it comes to team fighting compared to like a poor play or a poor decision there? Is it just in the results of the play, or are you able to discern kind of ahead of time whether or not this is a good choice to go into these kind of fights?
I think it's extremely subjective, and even if you have expert or like so-called experts in this field and they say like this is exactly what they should have done and this would have turned out perfectly, they might have missing out like a lot of stuff. And I think for the viewer, it's especially difficult because we're doing a lot of stuff and like a level that they cannot perceive, like how we're exactly pushing out stuff and what we're keeping track of. Like, it's our job to do this. Like, they have Shen ulti and TP, and if they do this, what do we do then? And how do we exactly push out, and do we wait? And it's like a lot to get into, but especially for team fighting, you should always ask yourself, what do they try to achieve here? And are they achieving, like, is it necessary? Absolutely. So Clown Fiesta is basically both sides are fighting for nothing. And then they just chase each other, and you don't have like a real goal. And if whoever wins, the outcome is really, really low. And the better teams are always setting the stakes higher. Like, if you're losing here the team fight and all your lanes are pushed, you're gonna lose 2 inhibitors. And like lower end teams will have team fights just to get kills. And then it's really, really easy to get the team fight because you just can kite back. You have no pressure on yourself. So I think this is like the most important thing. How much pressure is on each side for this team fight? For what are they fighting? And did they achieve what they wanted to do in this team fight? And then I think it's really interesting for the viewer because it's not so clear. So you can have actually this argument with your friend where you say, man, this was so great and this was so bad. We have exactly the same in the gaming house where people say, oh, this was not great. But, you know, this is how that's so interesting about it. You develop with the game.
I think visually you can also tell if like it's a good team fight or not, because if 2 good teams are team fighting, they're team fighting and either to deny vision or to gain vision somewhere. So that immediately tells you that it's for an objective. And that's a good team fight. Other teams might team fight just because they see someone and skill hero, see hero, and that's a bad one. So like just visually you can tell by seeing where the wards on the map are and where they're fighting, and that should tell you whether it's like a Clown Fiesta or if it's like a mismanagement of team fight or like anything like that.
I think we saw that really explained or showcased like SKT, KT. Obviously, 2 best teams in the world when they fight. You know, a lot of it wasn't actually necessarily like fighting over like a specific tower or something. It was more like, we want to set vision in your jungle so we can make these plays in a minute. So the enemy team is like, no, you're not going to put your wards here. We are going to fight you over these wards. And like they would fight over vision. Whoever would gain control would then be able to kind of control the pace of the game for a few more minutes. And it was like KT trying to push it early and SKT trying to defend late. And it was just a really cool way to see also the way they're fighting, where sometimes, you know, in Europe you see teams just kind of clash into each other. Everyone just kind of dies pretty quickly, and then the fight is over.
Disappears.
Yeah, the dust disappears. There's like one guy being like, hey, I'm alive, you know, I can't really do anything. Where when you watch like the SKT KT series again, it's like a lot of like in and out, people like stepping in, you do a little bit, then you back out again, people don't really die instantly, and they kind of like keep like having this standoff against each other, which just shows like really good understanding of, you know, how to fight and the limitation of your character. But as a viewer and as a caster, you know, we do get a little bit spoiled when we watch like KT and SKT because they are like the 2 best teams. Yeah. No one else in the world will play series like they do against each other. So it's, in that sense, it's a shame because you watch it and then you go and be like, okay, now I have to watch every other team in the world and I don't feel like I'm getting the same level. But that's just something as a viewer and as a caster, you know, as a coach even, like we just have to accept that mistakes will happen in games. It doesn't make it a Clown Fiesta. As long as there's a game plan, you know, as long as the teams are somewhat executing what they're supposed to do, it can still be at a very high level, just not necessarily the one where you go and win the world final against SKT and KT. But that's not the goal for these teams just yet. You know, getting there first and improving along the way is the key thing.
Yeah, so kind of the stakes in the fight, seeing what you really stand to gain when we look at a fight is kind of the determining factor between clean or maybe good games, I don't want to say clean games, and Clown Fiesta. Good to have that insight. However, a league that is no stranger to stakes and no stranger to clean games either. We're getting close to the end of the summer split or the spring split for the European Challenger Series. So let's send it over to Stress, who can break that one down for us.
Thank you very much, Dracos. Yes, let's get you all up to speed with what happened last week on the European Challenger Series. Well, last week we had the Battle of the Academies, Misfits Academy versus Fnatic Academy, and we were hoping one team would graduate, perhaps bringing in an older student in Amazing from Fnatic. They could have copied his homework and maybe got themselves a great grade. Well, it looked good in the first assignment of the split because Kikis in the top lane got so far ahead on this Jace, just split pushed everything. He got himself the bottom inhibitor tower, 2 Nexus towers. Didn't even matter that his team were losing a Baron because it was enough for Fnatic Academy to close out the first game. Clean win, strong win, and the strongest we've seen them since week 1. Game 2, however, not so great. They picked up Rengar for amazing, and it looked so good at the beginning of the game, but it got dragged out, stalled out on the game by Misfits Academy, and Mr. Rales, who was playing on Sivir, managed to get to that late game point, but had nobody around them to peel for him, and ended up being a 1-1 series. So unfortunately, there was no 2-0 victor to try and separate themselves from the pack in Series 1, but Series 2 brought us Paris Saint-Germain's first 2-0 win of the split as well. This was against Kinguin, and White Knight, a very old school player here in Europe, reaffirmed himself, and what better way to do it within this amazing top lane Gragas dive, level 6. Ice Beasto had no chance to get away from that, and honestly, PSG looked like a different team. They looked dominant, shut out Kinguin 2-0, and are making a late split run for a playoff spot. Speaking of playoff spots, Schalke 04, they don't only have a playoff spot, they're locked rank 1. They're going into the playoffs as seed number 1 as they are undefeated, and game 1 was a repeat of everything Schalke have showed us until this point. Selfie on the Kassadin alongside Lulex on Ivan, just snowballing the game so beautifully, and Schalke would continue to work as a unit better than any other team in Challenger do right now. But game 2, there was actually a game plan coming out from Millennium. Selfie got camped, ended the laning phase on the Kassadin at 0-4, and we thought maybe Millennium had what it would take to take down Schalke, put a blemish on the record heading into the playoffs, but it wasn't enough. It looked like Millennium had the win, and they would be pushing up to the inhibitor, looking to close out what would be a monumental upset, and they overstep. At the end of this game, Selfie had 9 kills from a 0-4 laning phase on this Kassadin. They turn everything around, and the history books show another 2-0 win for Schalke. It wasn't as clean as it's been before, but they are still undefeated. And this week, with their safe spot at 12 points, there's a lot going on for the rest of the teams here. 5 teams can still make it into playoffs. 5 teams could potentially tie for those playoff spots. And Schalke, we know, will be sat at the top of the table. We'll be bringing you Challenger action tomorrow at 3 p.m. Central European time. Keep an eye on it. There are so many huge implications for the EU LCS. But for now, let's get back to PGL. There was some interesting discussion about, perfect games and team fights. I'm loving it.
Thank you very much, Stress. Of course, I kind of want to touch on Challenger, interestingly enough, as we continue the story. Now, Hussein, you guys aren't too far removed from the Challenger Series, despite how fantastic you're doing in LCS. I kind of wanted to ask you, how does playing, at the comfort of your home during the Challenger Series compare to kind of playing on the stage here in the LCS?
I think, so when we were in Challenger, our goal was not just to make LCS. Like from day one, we said, look, it doesn't matter if you just make LCS if you're not good enough. So we're going to build on the basics, we're going to build on the fundamentals, and then go from there. So when we're in LCS, we're ready to actually play on the big stage. And overall, I think that helped quite a bit in our development. We didn't have to develop that during an LCS split, and that was like a big factor. I think that's what the best thing about Challenger is.
I feel like you guys last split were a little bit like Schalke is now, where you're kind of dominating the Challenger scene. People have very high expectations. Everyone is already saying, coming into promotion tournament, that Schalke will just qualify to the LCS. Yet we so often see that the dominating Challenger team, when they sit on stage in promotion tournament, even against the weakest LCS team, they're not always that dominant, and it's kind of shaky. You guys even lost, obviously, to Origin. Does it change a lot when you then sit down on that stage for the first time? Or is it just because Challenger teams maybe aren't as good as they do look in the Challenger scene?
I think it depends on how many rookies you have and what their personality is like. In our case, we had 2 rookies, I believe, at the time. And then we had Selfie, who hadn't been in LCS for a while. So, of course, on stage, we're going to play differently than Challenger, and I think we did. But we also fixed it very quickly for the Schalke series. So it honestly just depends on the team and what the coaching staff is like and how confident the players themselves are.
Okay. Did you have anything, Shibi?
You said that you're always preparing as if you want to compete in the LCS. What exactly does that mean in I understand the mindset, but what does it actually mean? Because I would like to, start thinking now, okay,
prepare for Challenger.
I prepare I'm gonna win Worlds, which is true, and we should have this kind of mindset, but there needs to be something following the mindset, right?
Well, so in our case, we had 5 really strong individual players, but especially if you watch the first game that we played in Challenger. It was very messy, people were throwing, and you really relied on the fact that these players were individually better than their counterparts. And so maybe they weren't making the best decisions in early game and mid game, whatever it may be, but they were getting away with it. And so the focus in Challenger was, well, let's kind of shadow box against an LCS team when we scrim. If we made this decision against better individual players, would this work out for us? If not, what's the best decision?
But wouldn't you do that anyway? Like, it's not like if my mindset is, okay, I just want to participate in an LCS or like in Challenger Series, you would still like try to improve that way, no?
Not necessarily. I know there are teams that, even in LCS right now, if they're not performing as well as a top 4 team, for example, their goal is different. A bottom 4 team in LCS right now is looking to not get into relegation. They might look at playing comfort champions more. They might look at just playing what's easy for them to execute on versus what's the best, game plan. As an example, Malzahar is very highly rated in Europe right now, where in the rest of the world it's not so high rated, and that's because there are teams that just overextend too much and get caught out.
Do you think they are aware that it's like suboptimal decisions that they are going for?
The Challenger teams, or?
No, like the bottom LCS teams that you say, like, for example, Malzahar is a strong pick and so on.
I'm not sure, actually. Like, maybe they're... I think, for example, Malzahar has something that bottom 4 teams should pick more often. It's an easier champion to execute on. It's easy to punish someone else, a better player on if he makes a tiny mistake. Where if a bottom 4 teams tries to execute on something like MF or Zyra support, it's a much different game altogether, right? And I think that was sort of our mindset in Challenger too. Well, we can take the easier route where like it's very easy to beat these teams if we just pick these 2-3 champions that we're comfortable and just keep snowballing on them. But if we make it more difficult for ourselves, if we actually look to make better decisions instead of the easy decision, then what does that play out like?
Right. It's the whole thing we see the big debate, about from other people as well, outside of just, us sitting right here, between early game snowball and like mid to late game focus and so on. And I think it makes a lot of sense that if you can stomp people in the early game because you have better lanes, there's better individual players, it's a very easy way to kind of pick up some wins. You might lose one game here and there, but you should pick up enough wins to move on. And then you kind of have to learn the rest after, which can be a problem. And I definitely also, I 100% agree with the Malzahar pick. Like, we were talking about this during the game when you guys were playing, where, Rocket had chances to, take a Malzahar and play, Malzahar Ashe bot lane or something with a Shen top, and you'd be like, okay, double CC bot lane, strong level 6, Shen ulti. It shows, a very clear game plan. You can tell your team as a coach, going in, guys, get level 6, use it, try to use it to snowball the bottom side. And they opted, to give you the Malzahar instead that Hylissang was using to create a lot of picks around the map. And it's one of these situations where, maybe, I'm not saying that's the only reason, Rocket is a bottom team, but I definitely agree that there are picks that can help them create or give themselves easier ways to maybe get some early kills and use it to try and get an advantage when they don't have a whole lot going on for them.
Well, it's interesting you bring up the bottom teams. I actually kind of want to turn to the top teams quickly because something you said really stood out to me, and that's that playing like you're playing against a better team or an LCS team or trying to find those windows. And that's kind of what we've heard has been the strategy from G2, right? They're not playing to be better players. They're not playing to find lane advantages or opportunities that are given to them. They're playing for better back timings. They're playing for better strategies, which sounds a lot like what you guys are doing or were doing in the Challenger scene. And my question is, at what point are you kind of holding back the development of your team, or at what point do you need to go, we're not going to be that team. We're going to be the team that wins early game, that wins on individual laning strength. And when is that kind of acceptable?
I think in Challenger, we knew that our early game would just be good enough just because we had the players for it. So we had the luxury to work on our mid game, and we did. And then when we got into LCS and you saw our early games were still good the first 2 weeks, and our mid game was difficult. So that's the area we need to work on. Then as we started improving on that, our early game started slowing down in LCS. So then we were like, okay, we need to mix it up a bit. We still have growth in mid game to do, but our early game has to be on point. So then we looked at jungle routes and different invade strategies and stuff. So I think, at least in our case, definitely focus more on mid game than early game, but it's still a bit of a mix. It depends on what strategy is available and such.
And I'm curious, Sheepy, do you think there's any room kind of in the competitive landscape for there to be a team that is just solely focused on winning out in the early game and trying to snowball from there? I feel like it's been a long time since we've seen a team that can get giant gold leads and just close out games very quickly. I feel like every team now has to learn the mid game and the late game as well. Is there any room left kind of in the competitive landscape for there to be a team that is just gods the early game, outplays their opponents on an individual level?
I kind of followed the discussion from, I think, G2 coach or, I don't know, mental
Weldon,
coach.
yeah.
Weldon. And there was a lot of uproar between early and mid game. And it was like 2 hours, 41 minutes discussion. I'm really shrugging my head because it's like, it's not that difficult. I mean, your pursuit is really, you want to be the strongest team. And whatever means you find for that, you're going to improve on it. And whatever you see you can improve on, you should just like keep working on it. So, and you do that every day. And it doesn't matter if it's like early game or mid game. Obviously, the point is that if you're together as 5 people and you want to kind of go over the replay, then you do the only stuff that you can do as 5 people, which is like you go over actions that you have to do as a team, because that just makes most sense to practice when we're together. Then if I just talk with one person and 4 people are not using their mind. Well, I will do that sometimes, you know, if it's like very important matchup and people should know what's going on there. But I think everyone is just missing the point. Like it's you just want to get better as much as you can. You improve on your mistakes. You try to learn as much as possible every day, and so on. And obviously, you will try to do the more team-focused stuff because it's just the most efficient. And everyone who doesn't do it is just missing knowledge, because I don't believe that the mindset. I think mindset is something the coach should like enhance and like try to show the way, so that people are always giving like 100%. Obviously, it's hard to give that, but that the mindset is like one thing. But I think that they are just missing how exactly to improve as a team, and that's where like experience is in. And I think, I mean, I have a bit of experience in coaching in this, and this is what I feel like. In the beginning, I just didn't know what to coach. And now I slowly understand what's actually important and like how to get in the right direction. And I think that's the most important thing for a Challenger Series team, that they just don't exactly know how to do it. And that's why it fails, and not so much for any other reason.
Yeah, overall, the big discussion seems to mainly be about like you don't have all the time in the world, so what do you focus on the most? And obviously, Shibis is like the number one goal is to focus on just improving, but then people can say we spend X amount of hours on this or X amount of hours on that one. Obviously, difference between teams. I don't know certain things, how much you can practice it in like your own region, because I think like G2's mid game, which is the big discussion, or mid to late game, showed a lot of weaknesses at IEM against like Flash Wolves and even some of the Korean teams. When you'd be like, do they get enough practice in Europe? Then in terms of mid game, do teams punish enough? That's some of the big questions, and why a lot of teams internationally struggle when they then get to face like the Korean teams who are like really, really good mid to late game, understand vision, pressure, jungle, all that kind of stuff, you know. So that's why it's really difficult to say we just practice like mid to late game, because you might not get in good enough practice in your own region to then use it against the top teams in the world. But maybe you don't need to beat them, and you know it's enough to win in Europe. I'm not sure, but it is difficult.
Well, let's focus in on Europe. We do, of course, have a very exciting schedule coming up next week. It is our final group of cross-week play here in the EULCS, and here's what we've got to look forward to. We saw it earlier. We talked to you guys a little bit about your matchups. Aside from your own teams, what is the matchup you're most looking forward to? Deficio, stop saying Roccat versus Origin. Let's get the guests in.
Come on, Roccat.
Rocket, Splyce, no, Vitality. I think that's G2 Splyce is like the other one that's really big. I don't know exactly how Splyce is doing against G2, because I think G2 is just like overall a little bit stronger. But I do think that there's like possibilities for like kind of an upset, or like at least Splyce showing a lot of strength.
Do any of you guys scrim Splyce a lot or anything? Like, have you noticed like progression from them? Because they started so slow, we expected so much.
I don't. We don't scrim so much against Splyce.
Okay.
We scrimmed a fair bit. I think they've improved quite a bit from where they were at the start of the week. I mean, they've always had the coaching staff to do so. They've always had that was the big thing about Splyce last year. So it would be weird if they didn't improve. I don't know if they'll improve fast enough, because I think G2, us, Unicorns, we all have good staffs at this point, and we all know how to improve as a team. But they've definitely improved enough where I think they can maybe take a game or two.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you very much, gentlemen. It's time for us to log out of the client here at the EULCS. Thanks to Sheepy, Hussein. I guess I can thank Deficio, too. We'll see you.
I was just here.
Yeah. We'll see you next Thursday at 5 p.m. Central European Time for another big week of the EULCS goodness. That's 4 days, ladies and gentlemen. Until then, have a great week. Good night. And we'll see you later, esports friends.
Vegge, you want to psych them out and stay on mid lane?
Yeah, I will stay here for a couple of minutes.
No, it's not gonna happen. He's gonna die to Raptors! Taste the fear, defensive leap, but the Krug's helping out, and Kakao gets first blood. And man. Expeke decides to engage, puts down the Glacial Fissure. Good damage, teleport followed through for Sartorius. Peke and Tabs in the 2v2.
Yes.
They're following their leader. Expeke is leading the way. One more hit for the stun. Ignore goes down. He's going to be able to find some support. Red buff, true shot. Tabs, snipes, and Summer. Flash over as Alfari wants to try clean up. Nagan's running for his life. The Riposte will not find a stun. A lunge forward as the challenge is completed. 2 members of Misfits kill for 3 of Origin. Kakao looking to set up. Sonic Wave. Gonna get needed just yet as Kakao's tanking the turret. They're trading aggro back and forth, dashing in, dashing out.
Nice. Big bot.
So scary. The Equalizer gets everybody. Baron's picked up by Origin, but at what cost? Misfits are looking to kill the Nexus, not before they tag up Expeke. And with 14 losses, Origin break the longest losing streak in EU LCS history.
The Baron might be up for grabs after all. A double kill from Faxi. They're sweeping away the Unicorns. The Baron's still on. A triple kill for the Mega Gnar. And there they go. Xerxes secures the Baron, but there's hardly anyone to hold it. Unicorns are cleaning up. It's Betsy taken down to 0. A triple kill for the Jhin. And Yarnan is the only one to live. It's all Nexus. Unicorns. The fans say fear their horns, and Rocket know exactly why. After game 1, Unicorns lead the series.
Into jump.
There we go, jumped on, and it's first blood. Betsy taking tower shots.
No.
He's gonna go down, and Exile gets a return kill. Visit Chachi, gun to the head of the AD carry, and Exile just dominates what did, and Betsy finds himself alone without allies. Even Hylissang gets a kill. Exile seemingly moving ahead. He gets 1. Can he get more? He gets taunted up, but the rest of his friends have arrived. They jump on to get another kill. Cannon Barrage. Betsy's fired down, and all of a sudden the Unicorns decide they want to end this right here, right now.